And she actually emailed me yesterday to discuss everything that we were going to do. So I know she hasn't forgotten. I know she was planning to come. So I'm a little bit concerned that she might be having some technical difficulties. I keep checking my email to see if she's having trouble getting in. And so we're just going to start, because I know I don't want to keep you all waiting, with this discussion of James Baldwin's letter to his nephew. Now, let me give you a little context for this. So Crystal is the dean at the University of Houston downtown. And over the summer, when first we had the shutdown, and then the Black Lives Matter protests began. And there was a lot of students that wanted to talk about what was happening on campus. And she's not in she's a dean in in student services. Like she's not over an academic center. She's not in African American studies. She's not in any center on campus that deals with race or gender issues or those things. She's a Black woman that said someone needs to talk about this, and her campus wouldn't do it. They were kind of, they said, I'm sure that students can find those resources somewhere else. And so she just took it on herself to invite students to come to a virtual discussion about Black Lives Matter and about their responses to the police brutality that they were seeing over the summer, and to the protests that they were seeing over the summer. And a whole bunch of students showed up. And Crystal, there she is. Good.
I'm so sorry. I thought it started at 12. That is my fault.
No problem. I was just giving them your backstory about how you started this whole discussion this summer. And I said, I'm just going to hand it over to you. But I already told them about how your campus, they weren't that willing to have these discussions and start this work. And so Dean Guillory did it out of just her sense that we need to have a discussion. And so we talked about that last month when she was here. She spoke last month in an honors college event with me in the beginning of November. And then we decided at that event that a good thing for us to talk about this month would be James Baldwin's letter to his nephew. So that's the attachment that I sent to all of you. And now I'm going to turn the time over to her, because I know she's got a lot of great things to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Westman. And I do apologize. It's funny, I had a meeting that ends at 12 and I was like, I gotta go. And anyway, I'm here, enough said. So, James Baldwin, it was a short reading, right? But there's a lot that's packed in there. There's some quotes that I just want to go to just, dive into them. I thought it would be a great idea to analyze, discuss, some of these quotes and do, just ask you, do you think that it is relevant today at the end of 2020? So, and I'm using my phone today because I have better connection. The last time I froze, and it's funny because I'm like, I wonder why they're not responding. Because I was frozen. So, and your pages are different than mine, than the year that I have. But if we could go to the part, give me just 1 second if you don't mind, because I want to be able to, actually, I'll just read these phrases because they're really short, instead of me trying to find it on yours. So it's in I can tell you the actual page though. It's in the first full page, to where he was talking about his father. And he goes, you may be like your grandfather in this, I don't know, but certainly both you and your father resemble him very much physically. Well, he is dead. He never saw you, and he had a terrible life. He was defeated long before he died, because at the bottom of his heart, he really believed what white people said about him. Thank you, page 15. It's a short quote, and it compares to the idea of what he said. The problem is that we have to accept white people for what they believe. And so if you just look at this, this juxtaposition of one set of people, Black people, being broken by believing what white people say about them, and then this idea of, but Black people are expected to accept that white people have they bought into it too, that I'm superior. And so that is his argument. That was his argument in 1963. And so I would love to have an open discussion with you right now of what is happening, December 1st, 2020, obviously more than 50 years later. So there's other, of course, excerpts in here that we can definitely dive into. But for right now, let's do it. Let's dive deep. The last time I remember, people were either just unmuting their microphones and speaking. So because it's an open dialogue.
Crystal, I'm just going to jump in and say that I love this question because, I teach primarily in gender studies, but one thing I tell my students all the time, that these systems would not endure if women didn't support them too. That because my students will say in class, oh, well, men are doing this and men are doing that. And I say, oh no, we're all doing it. Like, this is not, so that's, I love that question about systems of oppression are maintained because everyone maintains them.
And that I'm so happy that you said about women, because this goes back to the example that you gave us last time about Amy Cooper. Is that her name? Yeah, because she's aware. She's aware of this system. And so she said, so for those of you that don't remember that name, it's the woman who was in Central Park who said that she was going to call the police on the Black man who said, please leash your dog. So, and then so she knew very well. She was like, I'm just going to say that you're threatening me. And just imagine the audacity to be able to tell someone that in their face, knowing it's a lie. But because history had taught her, a police officer is going to believe me. You have been seen as a criminal no matter what. And, Baldwin goes into that. And there's also some quotes just from other parts of The Fire Next Time that I was just going to read to you that I thought was in this one, but I'm so sorry. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Me and Leanne could go on and on.
So do you want them to, thinking about this quote, what does it mean to say that he believed what white people said about him? And how is it that women say support oppressive systems that oppress them? And how is it that people of color might actually believe the things that are said about them? Like, what does that mean? And what does that look like in 2020, especially like Dean Guillory asked?
Yeah. So let's just think about the, in 2020, George Floyd's murder, right? Very public. It was an execution. But this sparked something in people that was very different. I do have a colleague that he's a philosopher, and he was like, yeah, but it'll die down. And I was like, oh, no, all of the energy that was behind this. So that is the question for you, because if we don't start questioning this in the sense of the people who are supporting these systems, nothing will ever change, ever. How do we address this? What does this mean today? Please, someone say something.
I was thinking that, so like what you were saying about why women might support systems that actively oppress them, and maybe people of color are believing the stereotypes about them. It's a lot of like, you've probably all heard of like internalized misogyny and everything. That we're taught to, discount women and to value them less, and like it's actively in our systems, and it's in our institutions. So there's a lot of internalized misogyny, a lot of, I don't want to say internalized racism because just prejudice, I guess, internalized stereotypes. So I think that that has a lot to do with why the systems are upheld, because, you know, we're kind of, it's ingrained in us from when we're kids. So changing it seems like it wouldn't be right in some senses for a lot of people. So yeah.
I do want to counter that internalized racism is very real for maybe almost every Black person. But of course, I can't say that. I can't speak for all. But James Baldwin has he speaks to that. That was a quote that I wanted to read to y'all because I felt horrible. I was like, no, it's in the second part. But while I'm finding that, if anyone wants to speak to what Emily just said,
like bounce off of what Emily said.
Mhm.
I feel like we're kind of like so scared. Like she was even scared just to say it in that sentence. Like we're so scared to call someone out on being racist. And we want to use other phrases and terms like prejudice and you didn't mean it that way. But in the end, like we just need to say like you're being racist. We're so quick to call people out on their sexism, but not on racism. And I feel like that's a big like fight in the internal racism and with what he said and everything. Like if you can come to terms with like the fact that you are being completely wrong, then it'll be easier for you to learn that this is not it and you need to do something else.
So, okay, Brittany, thank you for saying that. And so I wanna ask a hard question. So we're having an open dialogue here, okay? So we're getting real. So you said it's easy for people to call out, you know, oh, that's sexist, right? So my first question is, why is that? Why is it that it's easier to say that someone is more you know, they can call out sexism and not racism? And first, I'll leave that, and then I'll have my other part. So, so let's go there first.
I think part of that is just that people like sexism is more okay nowadays. Like it's not okay whatsoever, but it's more normalized. No, actually, let me say this the other way. Racism is more normalized that they don't see it as the problem, and they don't think like saying a certain like they shouldn't be saying that, they shouldn't be doing this. Like they don't think that's a problem because it's so normalized to know that that is racism. What you're doing is wrong. Whereas sexism is more. I feel like there's more of a stance on it now, and like there was in the past. Like we've got our rights. Like women have more of a movement that they feel as if they can make these jokes and then not actually like to make the I don't know how to say it. Like
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about it. No, I get it, and that's why we're talking about it. Wait, someone said something in the chat because I saw microaggressions. If we can go to that, because she was speaking to what you were saying, Brittany. Okay, so Alexa said, I completely agree with her. And I think that when people say microaggressions and when they are being racist, people are called too sensitive, oh, interesting, or snowflake. And I think it is because racism is normalized. And then we have racism is so ingrained from Katie. Racism is so ingrained in people's everyday lives that they might not recognize it to call it out. Wow. Like the microaggressions Alexa mentioned. Whew. Okay, so the conversation got very deep and real very fast. There's so many things that I want to tease out of that. So if we say that, so she said racism is normalized, right? For the person that said that, please go ahead. Let's talk about why it's normalized.
Did anyone else want to go off that? Because I know I mentioned it, but it was mentioned in chat too.
So yeah, I wasn't the one who wrote it, but going off that, a lot of things that are coming to the front lines of this whole war against racism is police officers and policing, and how racism is so ingrained in that system that it's hard to, I guess, fix what's happening with the policing system. And so a lot of people are saying like abolish the police right now, which is basically start it from the bottom, build it back up. Because right now it's been built up with racism included within it. So I think going off that, a reason why, yet again, people are more prone to talk about, oh, that's sexist, and not so much to say that's racist, is because it's ingrained in such like a big part of our society, policing and such of that, that they're almost scared to go against that because people are kind of ingrained to be scared of the police, especially Black people. And it's just because of that, I think that's why it's just how it's been so far.
I agree with what you're like the part with like the police. I feel like people are so scared to like say it and go against it because they think they're going like people are losing family members and like, oh, if you're for Black Lives Matter, then you're not for police, and they're not seeing the problem in it and the like the you can't be one without the other is what some people are trying to say. And I don't think that's true. And I think that's like a big thing that needs to get through. Like a lot of people have gotten like we've taken the steps in sexism and now it's just to take the steps here too. And it is a big thing to restart because it's so ingrained and it's what this whole country was built off of is racism and slavery. To take it out would to be redo and restart the whole political system. And that's not many people are ready or are able to do that because they're scared, like because they are scared.
I want to add on to what Brittany was saying, because it was actually pointed out in the letter that I thought was really interesting. And I thought that was like a point that's never came to my mind, that people that I guess I would consider to be a little more closed-minded to this subject tend to be afraid to deviate from the norm of internalized racism, that they would accept, well, if they're not outwardly being racist to somebody, insulting somebody, they can still go back to their norm from the past of being able to be internally racist towards other people. And I thought that was interesting, that the reason why people, or I guess society, may not be changing is because they're really afraid to leave that norm behind. Like Brittany was saying, that people are scared.
I think people get really comfortable in their beliefs like that they've been raised on, and a lot of it is microaggressions. Like they think these thoughts and they know that it's not polite to say out loud. They know that it's offensive and insulting to say out loud, but they still think them and they think the way that they think, and they're able to internalize all that. So why would they're never challenged on it. So they have no incentive to change it. So they don't really learn, even if they aren't outwardly, it's not, I think it's like Jim Crow versus microaggressions. Jim Crow is outward, and a lot of modern racism is outward. People are dying, but a lot of it is microaggressions, and people aren't challenged on that. So they have no incentive to change the way that they think at all.
And going off that, even when they're challenged on these microaggressions, like especially with everything that's going on right now and like all the Black Lives Matter protests and how people have come up with like the counter argument of Blue Lives Matter. And it's just in order to just diminish Black Lives Matter. And they don't realize this. They're just saying this because they believe in the police so much. And I saw something the other day that was like, no, we don't think that all police are racist, and we don't think all police are the problem. As you put it, you just fit the profile. So I don't know. It's just going off that point. It's just like, it's hard for them to change their thought process in that way too.
So I was personally enjoying the flow of the conversation, and I have someone brought up something about it not being challenged, and with people saying that they are afraid. So when we're saying people are afraid, are we saying that white people are afraid to not go to challenge this system? Is that what we're saying?
It's a
And it's
lot
okay.
easier
It's a
for a
lot.
white person. It is a lot easier for a white person to challenge the system. So
So you said it's a lot easier for a white person to challenge the system?
Oh yeah, it's so much
Okay.
easier. Like, I mean, easier in terms of they're not gonna face the dangers, I guess, that a person of color might face if they're trying, like, I think it's like a lot of like the white savior complex kind of comes in too, where, like you think, you know what I mean? The white savior complex where it's like, oh, I want to do this because it looks good. You
Yeah.
might believe deep down like that it is like your moral obligation to stand up for people who don't have that kind of voice, but white people they get a megaphone compared to the whispers that are heard in the Black community about this, because they aren't heard. They don't get that kind of platform, so when celebrities and stuff speak out about it, yeah, maybe they don't do much about it, but all they have to do is say something and people praise them. So it's a lot easier for white people to say anything, and
Yeah.
when Black people are trying desperately to get their voices heard, it's just almost impossible sometimes. So
Oh, totally. There is a saying at the very end of the book. Well, pretty much he says, I don't have to read it to you. He says, look, this is the way that we can combat this problem. He was like, look, Black people have been saying it, nobody's listening to us. He was like, what we need white people to start calling people out. So I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. Because he said we can't get anywhere if white people aren't speaking up against this system. And so that made me think of something when I think it was you, Emily, you said they're not being challenged. They're not being, outright told, hey, this is wrong. And so a question that I was thinking of is, what do you think about having this being taught, in like K through 12? I don't really know what grade, we could start with here, but the history books that we do have, think about the history that you've been taught. Because Brittany was saying, America, the way that it was started by slavery, started on slavery, started on racism. It is ingrained within every being. Look at our laws about Black people being counted as 3/5 of a person. So it is, Native Americans, Asian Americans, it is everywhere within our laws in the past and policies. Let's think about now you know, with how immigrants are being talked about, and we'll just say certain parties because I know I can't get political, but anyway, so yeah, racism is just rampant everywhere. So my question is, what if, let's say the real American history was taught, because it is a whitewashed version that was taught when I was in school. I'm not really sure the history that y'all learned when you were in school. Are they talking about other people outside? Are they examining what happened with Christopher Columbus? Are they
no,
examining, Thanksgiving?
no,
You know,
Definitely not.
modern is like at least like in New Jersey, it's relatively like it's slightly more center than I think like towards the whitewash, but still we learn about like American like atrocities as if it was just like, oh, that happened, like the atomic bombs and the Native American genocide. Like it's like, oh, that happened, moving on. Like it's never like we no reparations were made, like stuff like that. There's just no like acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It's just like this needed to happen for this to happen, but there was still a genocide in between. So I feel like maybe we should acknowledge that at some point. Would be nice.
yeah. Okay. So wow, the chat's going bonkers. So I got a lot of people are saying that yes, the real history should be taught. And I saw some people saying that the sooner the better. And I'm over here and I'm hesitating a bit. Just simply because this is rather personal to me. I have a 6-year-old little girl, and right now in school they're taught everybody's friends. They're not other students. we're all friends. And we haven't really talked about race because I don't know how to like burst her bubble. So, if somebody could just speak to that, because they were saying the sooner, the earlier, because I agree, we would have a different America if people would start to think about what were the repercussions of the atomic bomb. How did that even get to happen and be accepted, and no one questions it or thinks about it on a national level with talking about it. I'm sure people maybe questioned it privately, or the sad part is maybe some of them didn't. Anyway, so those are, yeah, please go ahead. I hear somebody unmuted.
It's me, but I just want to jump in and say oh wait, I forgot what I was going to say. That I really like your point about this discomfort with going beyond that elementary school narrative of, we're all friends and we all get, and everyone's, no one's different, or, I mean, everyone's, well, I don't know, I guess I say everyone's special, but I think thing that really struck me in the reading was he kept talking about white people's innocence. And they have this innocence about history, and because, like some students are saying in the chat, we teach it from the victory side, right? And so I have a friend who has a middle schooler right now, and she got on Facebook and was complaining that her son was learning about the rape of Black women during slavery. And she said, I don't want my son learning about rape, and I don't want him thinking like why do we have to talk about this? And she even wrote on Facebook, I don't see color, and I teach my children not to see color. And I thought, oh my gosh. I know, like, come on. And fortunately, people that are closer to her and that are people of color said, when you say you don't see race, you're ignoring history, like you're refusing to grapple with something. But I really think that's what her Facebook post was. I want the innocence, exactly. And so I love that he says in this passage that white people have to be willing not to be innocent, a willingness to not, and I think there's a real resistance to that, to saying, wait a minute, I'm not the bad guy. Especially when the history we tell tends to say that we're the good guys, the Americans are the good guys. And so I think that's not, I think that, her post just encapsulated what you're talking about and what James Baldwin is talking about. And it was just a few weeks ago. It wasn't like, this wasn't like, well, Facebook's pretty young, right? So, she's grown, she's 40 years old. This isn't a woman that's just starting to think about these things.
Yeah.
So.
Dang it, I had a thought, and because I'm 40 years old, it floated away. Oh gosh. Oh, okay. No, here it is. And so I'm just throwing a question out. Are we like this because our society, how Dr. Westman was just saying, and everyone's special, that we tend to have a polite, we want to say that we have like a polite culture. We're not crude, we're not in your face with the facts, because the truth makes people uncomfortable. And I'm coming from this from a Black woman. So that was an earnest question. That was an honest question when I was like, so are white people afraid to say these things? So I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, to talk about it, to acknowledge it, is to feel I imagine some pain. There is something called, what is it? Help me out, Dr. Westman. White guilt. White guilt. I wonder if it is something that has to do with white guilt. Are any of y'all familiar with white guilt? Am I just speaking something brand new?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
I think when I was first trying to identify and grapple with the ways that I have caused harm as a white person who grew up in a town that's 91% white, who like the biggest thing I cared about in high school was what I was going to get on the SATs, was that I cling to my identity as a good person. And I think I have seen people around me, particularly like the women in my family, I think we are taught like don't see color, like even acknowledging that racism is a thing will perpetuate it. That's just so false. And like it really speaks to the way like even if you go to a high school that's considered like one of the best in the nations, when we are talking about history, we don't learn about these things. Like I took a class called Race, Class, and Gender, which was an elective, and it was taught by a white man, and only girls took the class. And like, I don't think it's so hard to get through to people. And I've tried to have these conversations with my family, especially like over quarantine and during the protests. And it's just like pulling teeth. Like they don't even want to acknowledge that there's a problem. So how are we ever going to be able to fix it?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm starting to have a lot of faith in this younger generation. And then, you know, I live in an area that is pretty much Trump country. And then I see young white boys walking around with a Trump flag. And then I'm just like, whoo, a little scared. I just made it political. Sorry, Leanne. But anyway, yes, thank you for saying that, Jane. I imagine, you know, these conversations are hard to have with generations, you know, before you, just because, yeah, they just didn't really talk about it. Anyway, go ahead.
Crystal, I want to go back to this question that you brought up earlier, and that Brittany brought up about talking about sexism versus talking about racism. And Jane's comment just made me think about this, that, you know, people live with women, like men live with women, and they interact with women all the time. But white people can live in a town where they maybe don't have neighbors that are people of color, or colleagues or friends. And so they don't interact with them in ways that they, you know, like you can, I mean, I don't have sons, I have daughters, but I mean, you know, I have brothers, I have male colleagues. I mean, and I interact with men all the time. So I wonder if that's one of the reasons why it's easier to point those things out. Whereas if you don't interact with people of color, and there are white people who can arrange their lives in such a way that they don't really interact with people of color in a meaningful way. You know, they might say, well, we go to the same school, or we go, you know, we're colleagues or neighbors or something like that. But if you're not hearing those stories from people, how do you, you know, it seems like it just reinforces this sense that it, especially what Jane was describing, a kind of taboo subject or something that makes people uncomfortable. What do you think about that?
Question to me. Oh, to the audience. I'm like, question to me or the students? You're on mute. You're on mute. What did you say, Dr. Westman?
Yeah, to everyone. Like I would say, coming back, because I think that's an interesting point that Brittany made. But then I think Jane's comment made me think that maybe this is why you know, why white people are able to maintain that kind of innocence too, because they can kind of arrange the world that they move through. Like you can go places and expect that there's going to be other white people in a lot of places in America, which isn't true when you're a person of color. You might see other people of color, you might see a lot of white people. Like, but Jesse, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to add in, Dr. Westman, that I agree with you completely, how people just arrange their lives to have it where they're surrounded by people they feel that they're similar to, and that they're afraid to integrate themselves with people that are different. So then this is why I feel like we have the problem of, I guess, other generations or even people, younger generations that are still running around with flags that say Trump on them. You know, I mean, I feel like people don't understand and they don't hear those stories. So why do they want to help somebody else when they don't get it? And I feel like that's the problem that needs to be addressed, is maybe integrating it more into younger education, elementary school, saying what the problem is. So then kids can grow up to understand the problem instead of just falling right into that same path that their parents went to, and then arranging their lives again to stay with people they're similar with, and instead of integrating with themselves with different types of culture.
Sorry, I wanted to add in, I'm on my way to work, but I'm very involved in this conversation, that that I think, like, off of what Jesse said, that people, like, very much, and I don't think that they even do it on purpose, but they very much center their lives around where they are comfortable. And I had, like, this someone I, like, recently became really close friends, and, like, she doesn't have very many other friends, and she has said to me several times, like, I never thought my best friend would be a white girl. Like, but, like, not, like, just in the terms of, like it's just, like, it's ingrained so much what you surround yourself by and what you were raised around. And I feel like the younger we start teaching it in schools and away from out of the house, that they get another perspective, the better. Because even, like, my niece, she is a quarter Black, but she is primarily surrounded around white people. So her perspective on this is going to be completely different from another person. Like, and if you got like, I feel like the more perspectives and the more opinions and sides that you get will help you form a better, like, well-rounded opinion on this. And people may be scared. Like, I don't want to have the conversation with my niece personally. Like, that's not something I want to have, but it's something that needs to be had. And the younger you start, the less awkward it will be.
Yeah, I remember in the 3rd grade, I learned about slavery. And I remember I sat on my grandfather's lap later that evening and I said, Papa, did you know that we were slaves? And his answer was, oh, our people weren't slaves. And then I found out he was like, our last name, slave owners. I was like, now I'm very confused. No, but anyway, he completely disassociated with the Black side. He was like, only one of them was, and she had some sons that were,
my niece, if I try to tell her she's Black,
yeah.
Like, when I tell my niece she's Black, she's like, no, I'm not, baby, I'm white. And I'm like, no, listen, like, you're definitely still Black. Like, you got white, but you're still Black, definitely. Like,
yeah.
I feel like it's just, it is this association from it. Like, that's a big part of it too. Like, yeah.
Yeah. But so there were some comments in the chat. Some people were saying I don't know if these are the latest one. Some conversations can ruin relationships between family members because of how hard it is to get a side to understand, especially traditional minded family members. It is so normal for them that they don't understand. It's our job to help them understand and educate them. Yeah, I'm actually gonna say it. If America is going to change, I'm with James Baldwin. It's white people that have to do it. And with that being said, the whole innocence that he was talking about, and with what Dr. Westman was saying, is the difference with sexism and racism, that you get to create your own world and who you're around. Research is saying now that it is better to have, because diversity is the big thing now, diversity and inclusion and equity. And, that's how we're going to fix the problem. But they were saying that organizations benefit from having different races a part of the organization, because they bring different perspectives and experiences, right? And so the only reason why I bring that up to you is because it's only in the workplace to where you have to be out of your norm, depending upon where you work. But I think it's important, that people get outside of their of the relationships that they have, and venture out. It is the only way to where we can really realize the humanity of everyone. Because yes, we are different in ways when it comes to, how the world sees us. but we all love the same. We all hurt the same. And it is so important to be able to get past just those barriers, but to recognize, what that person's history brings to their existence. So I'm putting a call out. White people, talk to the other white people. Trying to bring some levity to this. There was a quote that I did want to read. If someone had something to say to that, but there's something really important that I wanted to say when it came to internalized racism. Is that okay if I read that quote, Dr. Westman?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So like I said, it's not in your reading because it's in the second part.
I'm
But
gonna
he
try
said,
to type it. Go ahead.
oh, okay. Negroes in this country and Negroes do not strictly or legally speaking exist in any other state, are taught really to despise themselves from the moment their eyes open on the world. This world is white and they are Black. White people hold the power, which means that they are superior to Black. Intrinsically, that is, God decreed it so. And the world has innumerable ways of making this difference known and felt and feared. Long before the Negro child perceives this difference, and even longer before he understands it, he has begun to react to it. He has begun to be controlled by it. Every effort made by the child's elders to prepare him for a fate from which they cannot protect him causes him secretly in terror to begin to await, without knowing that he is doing so, his mysterious and inexorable punishment. He must be good, not only in order to please his parents and not only to avoid being punished by them. Behind their authority stands another, nameless and impersonal, infinitely harder to please and bottomlessly cruel. So, if anyone was ever thinking about, I wonder what it's like to be Black, there it is. There it is. Um, Especially if you have a Black son. You have to teach them early on. And if y'all haven't seen that movie, oh my goodness, I'm thinking of the Hair Conference. I presented on. I talked about that movie. I'm sorry, I just can't remember the name of it right now. But it's a young Black male who's killed.
Is it Fruitvale? Was it
What is it?
Fruitvale? Fruitvale?
No, not Fruitvale, but that is a good one though.
Oh, I went to your
Yeah.
talk and I can't remember what you talked about either. But
No, it's okay. But it's the whole point of, because she talks about it in the beginning of the movie. She's like, we got the talk. So usually when people hear the talk, they're thinking about, oh, it's the sex talk. Not in the Black household. The talk is, this is what you need to do to survive being pulled over by a police officer. You put your hands on the steering wheel or the dashboard. You only speak when spoken to. You do not make any sudden movement. Um, the talk also consisted in my household that, I'm sorry, but all 4 Black males cannot ride in the same car. You're going to be seen as a gang. I had a cousin who wanted to walk down. Thank you, the hate you give. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne. Great movie, great book. So if those that are looking for some reading, read that. But I bring this up to you because there's no way that a person could ever, if you are white, you're not thinking about what it's like to grow up Black. It's not just a color difference. It is that you are told that you are seen as less than. And some people, when they are told that, they internalize that. They think that I am less than. If I'm seen that way, then I am. And it completely changes the trajectory of a person's life, of what they imagine that they can actually do or achieve. And so if one is just thinking about their personal safety of how to survive being pulled over by police officers, which you're supposed to think that the police are there to protect and serve, but not for Black people. They see them as they are the terrorists within their community. So I just wanted to say that when it came to internalized racism, that is real. I don't know any Black person that never internalized at least some of it. So um, I see some things in the chat. Did anyone want to unmute or speak to anything? That is true. When enough people tell you how to think and feel, eventually you will believe that too.
I think it's really important to the point that James Baldwin makes in the reading is that the whole culture is delivering this message. And so think about think about the images we have of people of color in the media, how in advertising and in movies and music videos, the type of characters that they play, the stories we tell, all of those things become a kind of this toxic sludge that we're all swimming in, and it's or part of the air we breathe, and those are the images that you see. And even and I have students tell me, I'm just finishing up another semester of gender and pop culture, and at the beginning of the semester I have students tell me all the time, well, I just ignore that stuff, I don't pay attention. I think, oh, okay. So somehow you're able to ignore it all, and the rest of us have been affected by it. Like we are all impacted by it. We are all, we are impacted by our cultural ideas about what beauty is and what talent is and what intelligence looks like. And if you don't see, I love that quote that's been moving around for the past, I don't know, I hear it a lot in the past 10 years. You can't be what you can't see, right? And so how do you, if everything you see, every doctor you see is a white man, and why would you think I'm a person that could go to medical school? Or if every, think of, if every drug dealer you see is a person of color, then you might think, I guess that's me, I'm going to be a drug dealer. So there's so much. In fact, I underlined it in the reading, but he said, let's see, the details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe what white people say about you. So it's not just that white people say racist things, it's that they created movies and TV shows and advertising and the entire culture to reinforce that message. And even the language we use, think about words like blacklisted or white, white being a positive color and black being a negative color. All those things work together in ways that, I love that that quote you read earlier, Crystal, where he doesn't even know yet that this is happening to him, and yet it's affecting him, right? And that's all of us, right? So that was on page 19, if you want to look at that quote.
Yeah, thank you.
Sarah, you should talk about that.
What am I saying?
Sarah's like, I'm here. What am I doing?
Sarah, talk a little bit more about self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, so we basically learned that there's because of labeling stereotypes and how young African American and Latinx children are viewed, like starting from a really young age in like schools and stuff, and how they're treated differently than their white counterparts, has an effect that lasts up until their adulthood. So basically, there are statistics that show that young Black boys and girls and Latinx boys and girls are more punished in school. So they're gonna receive more detentions, like they'll be written up more. And basically that's familiarizing them with punishments from a really young age. So when they're older and their actions have more consequences, they're already familiar with like a criminal justice system, essentially. So they're already used to being treated certain ways. And that essentially pushes them into, they call it the school to prison pipeline. So it's basically, since they're already familiar with being punished, they'll continue to behave in those ways because they don't know anything else. Like they've never been treated differently enough to behave otherwise. And obviously that doesn't go for everyone. Like it's not like a overarching thing, but for a large majority of people who are in like juvenile detention centers or in prisons later, they're a large majority of them are Black and Latinx compared to white or Asian or whatever other minority groups. So I think it's interesting that this kind of conditioning starts at a really, really young age, like from schools, like whether we realize that or not.
I feel like a lot of people of color have to work like twice or three times as hard just to be recognized and seen. And like I went to like a very predominantly white school when I was growing up. And like for example, like I was a really good athlete and we had like two sections, which is like nationals and presidential, like whatever. And then I made it to the presidential, but they kept me in national. I was like, oh my God. Like there was only two other girls on there. And like everybody else, like in the 8-1 class, for example, that was the top class, like there was like one other Hispanic kid in there and the rest of the class was white. I was like, but I was supposed to be in there too. And it's just like at that point, like I just didn't think like speaking up would like work or be beneficial of any way. But like I saw it and like I saw other people, like it was less in my high school because my high school is very diverse, but I saw it in my school at least a lot. And yeah, it's very annoying and very hard. And I definitely think like these conversations are extremely important to like to see and fight for like these like separation of race and everything.
So I just want to say something very quick, Karina. Speaking up takes courage, and you have to be able to be in for the battle for what happens when you speak up. But if you can get a group of people to speak up, it's not just you, which means that the attention isn't on you. And no one ever can deny a group of people when they speak up, because maybe those other people are afraid to speak up too. So just remember that there's change comes with a mass of people when you get everybody to speak up.
I'm glad you made that point, Crystal. And I think, and I was thinking the same thing, Karina. You alone shouldn't have to fight that battle. But some of you had written earlier that you worry when, as a white person, that you will look like you're trying to play that white savior role. And I think a way to maybe get around that is to use your privilege to amplify other people's voices. That in other words, if Karina's struggling, then don't say, oh, Karina, I'll fix this for you. But ride my horse into the principal's office and fix this all up. Instead, say, Karina has this problem. And I want to say that I think Karina's right. I think she does have this problem and amplify her voice. That's a way for the group to lift voices because the problem historically is that I want to say well-meaning white people, but they go in and they say, oh, I'll fix this. Don't worry, I'll take care of that for you. And that's not what people of color need. They don't need white people speaking for them or saying, I'll fix that for you. They need white people to say, Karina has an issue that's important and we should listen to her. And I'm going to listen to her. And that's a way to amplify. And I tell the same thing to my male students in my gender studies class. Just amplify what women are saying. Just speak up and say, I agree with what she's saying. She made a good point. She had a good idea, rather than just telling her, oh, I'll fix that for you. So.
I definitely agree with that point, because I see a lot of issues where white people will step over Black people's shoes and will just speak over them, and how they can make matters worse. Because I know one community, like the black people are like having an issue about something, and then white people will step over their voice and say something, and then even though the black people don't even have an issue with about it, and the white person will make the issue much more prevalent, and then will make the other side worse, and they can just make the matters much more worse and make the Black people side seen as maybe being quote unquote whiny, or they're never pleased about something, and they're just like, we're never really having an issue about it, until white people like made us the bad people by making it seem like we had an issue. And it's like they're trying to help, but they're not really helping.
This makes me think of a saying, Brianna, from something I learned in grad school in my research methods class. Our professor, so it was for Africana Studies. She said, in order to speak for the people, you have to speak to the people. And so just this whole idea of the white savior, you know, being able to fix something, right? You got to know what's wrong in order to fix anything. But however, it's not for them to fix that problem. It's Dr. Westman was saying, is it to amplify the voice, because only that group of people that this problem is happening to, only they can be able to fully express what's going on. And it is important to shine the light and the attention on them. But yeah, I'm sorry, this is so this is not an easy, and I applaud everybody for being here, and I applaud everybody for participating in this. But just make sure that you continue these conversations. It is the only way to change anything. You must change a person's perspective. I'm thinking of Carter G. Woodson as well. It's considered the father of Black history. He says that in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, you can train, if you can control a person's thought, then you can control their action. You can train a Black man to enter through the back door. We got a lot of untraining of these thoughts that we've had. We got to untrain our minds to believe into this system. And, you know, as Baldwin tells his nephew at the very end, he says that we cannot be free until they are free. And when he was talking about they being free, he means white people falling for the disbelief that they are superior. Because that is the issue here of why all of these atrocities and acts of, you know, against humanity have happened within America, the founding of it, starting with Christopher Columbus, to believe that if you are white, you can do whatever you want to these people. But anyway, I'm not sure what time this class ends, but
we are out of time. Yeah, we're actually out of time. Yeah. But I agree with you, and I think we will continue. We need to continue having these conversations. But you have been so terrific last month and this month. It's really been terrific to hear your perspective. I feel like we should. I mean, we barely got to dig into the letter. You know, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. I underlined a lot of things. I thought, oh, I hope we talk about this. I hope we talk about that. But I hope that it gave you a lot to think about. And like Dean Guillory said, that you are moving forward and having these conversations with other people too, and amplifying the voices of people of color so that they're heard as well. So I'm going to thank you, Dean Guillory, for coming today, and thank all of the students for coming and for participating. Your comments are really interesting. Thank you for using the chat, for jumping in and making comments here. This has been I guess this is one of the few upsides of the pandemic, is that I can invite my colleagues from all over the country to come to Rutgers and talk with students. So if we were not in a pandemic, she would not be here today. So I'm really grateful that she's here today. And I want to echo what Laura just put in the chat too. If you want to have more conversations like this, let us know, because it's easy for us to schedule these and bring people in to lead these. So I'm going to wish everyone a good day, and hope you had a nice Thanksgiving, and we'll see you again soon.
Everyone.